For centuries, the line between theft and service at sea was thinner than a signature. Same hulls, same guns. Same smoke, blood, and stolen cargo. What changed was not the act itself, but the authority standing behind it. With the right authorization, a captain became an agent of the state, praised for defending commerce and crown. Without it, he was a pirate, hunted, hanged, and erased. History celebrates one and condemns the other. The waves, as always, made no distinction. Piracy was never a failure of order. It was order, delegated, cost-saving strategy dressed up as morality. And the closer you examine it, the harder it is to maintain the comforting myth that governments merely reacted to chaos at sea. For centuries, they engineered it. They issued licenses to raid, invested capital into violence, collected taxes on plunder, and quietly stepped away when alliances shifted. Few things reveal power more clearly than the ability to rename the same behavior depending on who profits. This was not lawlessness. It was policy. A system designed to expand empires, weaken rivals, and generate revenue without official responsibility. Violence was outsourced. Risk was privatized. Profit flowed upward. And when the balance sheets no longer aligned, yesterday's heroes became today's criminals. This is the story of pirates, privateers, and logic turning theft into statecraft. To understand how piracy became a pillar of state power, you first have to understand the constraints early modern empires were trapped inside. By the 16th and 17th centuries, global trade had expanded beyond anything previous governments had ever managed. Precious metals moved across the Atlantic in bulk. Spices, textiles, and luxury goods crossed oceans from Asia. Plantation crops reshaped diets and economies across Europe. The profits were staggering, but so were the vulnerabilities. Ships disappeared for months at a time. News traveled slower than storms. And control weakened the further commerce moved from shore. No empire, no matter how wealthy, could afford to guard everything it claimed. Sea lanes stretched across thousands of miles. Merchant convoys were scattered, seasonal, and unpredictable. Permanent naval patrols were ruinously expensive. Ships required skilled crews, constant maintenance, and secure ports. Wars were frequent, alliances fragile, and treasuries perpetually strained. Even the most powerful states faced a dilemma. How do you protect trade you cannot physically supervise? The answer was not more ships. It was delegation. Rather than expand navies indefinitely, governments searched for a way to project power without bearing its full cost. They needed flexibility. They needed deniability. And they needed a system that converted private ambition into public advantage. The solution they settled on was simple in concept and radical in consequence. They licensed violence. States began issuing documents that transformed independent captains into temporary extensions of sovereign power. These licenses granted private vessels the authority to seize enemy shipping, confiscate cargo, and disrupt rival economies. The act itself did not change. Ships still attacked ships. Crews still fought and died. Goods were still stolen at sea. What changed was the paperwork attached to the violence. With authorization, seizure became enforcement. Loot became prize. Theft became service. This arrangement solved several problems at once. Governments avoided upfront costs. They did not pay salaries. They did not replace lost ships. They did not compensate failure. Risk was absorbed entirely by private investors and crews. Success, however, was shared. Profits were divided between sailors, financiers, and the state. Courts existed to legitimize the outcome after the fact, converting captured goods into lawful revenue. This was not chaos, it was design. Private capital financed the ships. Private labor accepted the danger. And the state collected revenue while weakening its rivals. If a voyage failed, it was a private loss. If it succeeded, it became national defense. This system allowed empires to scale their reach far beyond their official capacity. Violence was no longer limited by budgets. It was limited only by ambition, and ambition was abundant. By outsourcing force, states created a competitive market for destruction. Captains raced to intercept trade. Investors spread risk across multiple ventures. Ports flourished. Insurance markets emerged. Legal frameworks expanded to manage disputes over plunder. An entire economic ecosystem formed around sanctioned aggression. The ocean became a battlefield where legality shifted with allegiance and morality followed profit. Now what mattered was not behavior but authorization. And as long as violence served state interests, it was not only tolerated, it was encouraged. Once the system matured, its internal contradictions became impossible to ignore. On paper, privaters served the state. In practice, they learned something more dangerous. They learned that the state was optional. Privateering exposed a truth most governments preferred to obscure. The state did not create the value. It merely sanctioned the activity after the fact. Crews sailed the ships. Captains made the decisions. Investors supplied the capital. The government's contribution was permission, and permission could be revoked without warning. A war could end,